Welcome to Relationship Mastery, a podcast for those who want to learn how to master the art of creating happy, healthy, and loving relationships. Please join me, Adey-Jones, and my co-host, Barry Selby, each Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific for a lively and informative conversation on everything to do with relationships. So, hi, Barry. Hope you've had a great week.
Hi, Dale. Here we go again. It's going to be good to have a conversation. I love the fact that we are giving so much content and value to our audience. So this topic's going to be fun to talk about. So I'm glad we're here.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So so sort of almost like a follow-on from last week. Last week we talked about the post Me Too dating scene. Yep. So on that theme of dating, we thought we'd talk today about modern dating, what dating looks like today. And I heard a statistic over the weekend. It's like 55% of dating is now done online.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty amazing. Yeah.
Well, actually, to counterpoint that statistic, I remember reading an article. This is going back probably 5-6 years. The Match.com put out an article. Excuse me, it was an ad. It wasn't an article. It was an ad. Said that 1 in 5 relationships begin online.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow.
And I'm like, okay, so 1 in 5 relationships begin online does not mean 1 in 5 relationships begin on Match.com.
Mm-hmm.
That I would say that a large proportion of those online matches are not happening through dating apps, but through social media, because that's another app people meet on.
Okay, well, we will get to that one in a minute because I have a big issue with being stalked on Facebook by. I have on my profile that I'm in a relationship and everything, and I still get hit on. So, and I'm sure I know I'm not alone. A lot of my women friends feel the same way. But let's just chat about that. Let's chat about our experience with online dating. And I'd love to. Well, if you don't mind, I'll just start very quickly. Yeah, thank you. So when I first got divorced, I live in a very, it's like an island. I live in a place called Malibu in California. We have like two roads coming in and out, basically, or 3. So it is like a little island. And when I first got divorced, I remember I was in therapy at the time, and my therapist said to me, well, you're going to have to sort of go online. I was like, oh, I can't possibly do that. That's like tacky.
Oh, no.
And I had all these thoughts about what online dating was. And he said, well, be realistic. All you're going to meet if you start dating in Malibu is your friends' ex-husbands. And I was like, yes, and I know way too much about them. So that's probably not a good idea.
So your ex-husband's friends, I think you mean.
So you say that again?
I mean your ex-husband's friends, not your friend's ex-husband.
No, my friend's ex-husbands. All the available men in Malibu had once been married to my friends.
Okay, sorry, I was thinking the other way around. Got it. Okay.
So it was like I said, I don't know way too much about them. So, anyway, so I was I was really cautious, and I kept saying, no, it doesn't feel right. I want it to be organic. I just want to bump into somebody. And he helped me see that actually, men that were age appropriate, that were either widowed or presently, they had just gone through a divorce, were too busy raising their families or, spending time with their children or working to be hanging out in places to bump into women. That men that, and that there's also, which was really wonderful for me, I only did Match. But what I did is I always looked at the books that people read. Well, first of all, if any man had his shirt off and was standing in front of a fancy car, I was like, no way.
Indeed, yeah.
That's not what I'm looking for. But secondly, it was like I looked at what they'd read. And if they had at least read a book that I had read, and there was some type of, other factors, I thought, worst case scenario, we can talk about the book. We can talk about, because people go into these situations with these expectations and this list of, I'm looking for Mr. Right, and he better tick all the boxes. And I think that sort of puts a lot of pressure on that first date. I think if you go into it looking at like, oh, this is just an opportunity to meet somebody, expand my social circle, discuss things that we do if we shared interests and what books we've read. And so to me, it lessened the intensity of looking for Mr. Right. And so that was the first thing I wanted to say about that. So you tell me what you with online dating has been like?
Well, a couple of things. To be transparent for the audience who don't know, I've been single now since 2006. So 16, 17 years now. My last relationship and the two before that, I met through the programs I was in, my spiritual community and my master's program, the USM. We've talked about USM. And so once I got through that breakup, and I don't think I told the story, but it's another story, about what happened to me after that. Most of my searches have been through, or just say meetings with possible dates, have been through either social media, which happened a couple of times, or the dating apps, which happened more times. And speaking to what you said earlier about the men who you were considering were the ones that were too busy to be hanging out waiting to meet women. Those sort of men, though, same as a lot of the women I meet, are on the dating apps because that's almost a more efficient, well, how do you say this way, but it's a more efficient way to meet somebody, as much as that's not romantic.
Absolutely.
Because because it's 5 minutes a day, you can scan through and find ones you like, then maybe you can meet them later on. Something, it becomes a sorting system in a way. And to be transparent for a second, also, dating apps are primarily designed for men because they're a matter of swiping through profiles like you're hunting and seeking a target, which is really what masculine energy is focused on. For feminine, there's not really the right sort of thing. So what you did with by looking through for books that you had in common, that was more of a feminine approach, to be honest. Men don't usually do that sort of thing naturally, just to be clear. So for me, I definitely have played on different dating apps, and some I've just given up on because either the matches were so clearly not lined up because the app was not doing its algorithm very well, or the interface just wasn't comfortable to use. But I still am on the dating apps because I'm still single. And it's been interesting to use because the people you meet, you're going through, and depending on which dating app you're on, the information within that person's profile can be very informative or very uninformative, depending on what you write. So the dating apps are an interesting place to play because they're not clear. And of course, I'm realizing I said that if you meet somebody in a bar, you don't know much about them either. So the dating app can be more informative than if you meet some stranger in a bar type thing. But there's one other piece I want to drop in there, which is going to come back in a minute. Hang on a second. No, it's gone. All right. Continue.
It's interesting that you think that men and women date differently, which I would agree in general. But I also know there's some pretty predatory women out there who swipe left, swipe right. Oh, he's got a good body, he doesn't. And that's, so I think it can go a little bit both ways at times. But yeah, for me, which, as I say, I mean, I met my fiance on Match.com, and that was 13 years ago. And it was what also my therapist had told me. This is a great one. If you're newly single, my therapist said to me, treat it like a science experiment. He said, I want you to go on 10 different dates. Do not have a second date until you've had 10 initial dates with 10 different men. And he said, just take the time, because he knows me, I get attached too fast. So he said, take the time to just be like, oh, I like a little of this and I like a little of that. And to get a clearer picture across the board of what works for you and what doesn't work for you. And when I do my 6-week course, I talk about the pie, the 10 pieces of the pie.
Yes, right.
And I would say, if 7 are really good and you're really happy with it, and 3 pieces are a bit like, I sort of like men with hair and he's bald, or some just very minor, silly little things that are not make or break, then, I think it's okay to compromise. I think we've also been set up a little bit too. It's like, I often think that those dating apps are like walking through Costco and just, shoving things in your cart, knowing that you can return it next week if you don't like it.
Right.
But I think the expectations sometimes can be a little too high. I think, as I say, 7 pieces of the pie are really great. 3 are just, I can live with that. There's nothing. Now, those 3 things do not involve active addictions, abuse, lying, cheating. Those are not things that you should be living with and accepting. I'm not talking about those things. I'm just talking about very minor things that are not maybe your ideal, but they're certainly not deal breakers. So that was another piece of advice, which was great for me. It was really, really good. So Hootie was my first date. And I told my son, sorry, I do like you, but I've got to date 9 other men. He thought it was very funny.
It paid off for him, though.
It paid off, exactly. He was the one I went back to and said, okay, second date. And 13 years later, we're still together.
About the dates, because it's a thing I've talked about a lot. And I've had pushback from some of my colleagues in the dating and matchmaking industry, because I have a big point, especially after the Me Too conversation, about that first date hurdle or barrier. Because there's been a traditional model about the first date is the one where you get dressed up, you go to a fancy restaurant, and it's a big outlay, and basically crossing a line where you're invested to a degree. I'm very passionate about telling my clients and my audience, and I do it myself, is to go on basically like a get to know you pre-date. It's like you were saying about on his first dates, was really qualifying each person to get a sense of what they were like. And if you're out on the dating apps, dear listener, and you're checking people out, I highly recommend, first of all, well, let me back up 1 second. Because of what's been happening with the scammers and everything else that's going on, the dating apps, most of the new dating apps, or I should say the current version of the dating apps, have built-in audio and video communication. So you can communicate through the app without giving out your personal phone number or anything else. And you can find if this person is real, first of all, they're not a scammer. And secondly, you get to know if you like them before you give them any personal data that they can then find you with. So that's a key thing to do first. Second thing is when you get to meet somebody in person, once you've qualified them that far, is to meet them somewhere in public in the daytime where you both get there yourselves without one picking the other one up. So there's no owing anybody anything. Do something cheap and fun, maybe mini golf or coffee or ice cream or a walk on the beach, something that is low investment, because if you decide this person doesn't work out, there's no feeling like you owe them anything, and they don't feel like you owe them anything either. So it gives it a much cleaner break. Because the thing is, if you like that person, then go on the first date because you're already excited. You're like, this person's really nice. I like them. Let's see what happens when we go out romantically. So I'm passionate about people building up to that first date rather than like going the first date first thing. It's much smarter.
That's very interesting to say that. And I know for me, out of those 10 dates I went on, that there was some people that said, let's just meet for chat. There were some people that said, let's just meet for coffee. There was, varying degrees. But I do have to say, Hootie did invite me to dinner. And it actually, it meant something to me. It meant, it really did. It meant that it wasn't a sort of financial thing. It was more like, I got a sense that it was an important date and that he was inviting me to dinner, and it had some importance to it, rather than I do 10 of these a week and I can't afford to dinner, so you're going to be, I'll get you a coffee. Or you can even buy your own coffee. I think I even bought my own coffee. So there was something special about that. I felt like this is a man that doesn't do this every single night of the week. He's invested in this, and it's a night out for him with somebody that was going to have they're going to have a good conversation with. So I think I just have to be honest that was my experience. I thought, that was very nice of him, and I didn't feel I owed him anything. I was, I just felt like, no, I'm company, and so it was fine. It wasn't a terribly expensive restaurant, and I don't think I ate anything because I don't normally, shoveling food in your mouth on the first day is not exactly that. So I might have ordered a salad. So I wasn't drinking, so I didn't drink anything. So that was that.
Well, basically we've offered 2 different counterpoints, which is great, because that means the person, people in the audience can choose which one works for them best. And that's the thing. I like the idea that we can give a spectrum of choices. Yeah.
And what we're going to talk about next week, this is important, is how we handle breakups and heartbreak and things like that. So this is going to be a carry on to that. But what I also wanted to mention is that often when we go on these dates, whether they're online or however, you've met somebody and somebody doesn't ask you for a second date, or somehow they ghost you, which is a whole other show, ghosting. But say it doesn't pan out. So many of us take that so personally. And that's what I really want to talk about. It's never personal. I'm going to get my little snow globe. People that are on listening to us on YouTube, the platforms and podcasts are not going to get this, but those who watch on our YouTube channel will see my little snow globe here. And this snow globe is that represents an individual, and at our center are all these fabulous, gorgeous spiritual beings. But we live in these little thought-created bubbles where we have a lot of thinking. And most of our thinking has originated from the first 10 years of our life.
Right.
So if somebody chooses not to see you again, it is not personal. It's just that their thinking tells them that this isn't a match. That's all it is. It's not an indictment. It's not to say you weren't good enough or that there was something wrong with you. So the more that we can remember that, it's just somebody has a different desire or expectation or it's just a different, what they're looking for is different to who you are, but it doesn't mean you're any less than or not good enough. And so many people go straight to that point, and we'll talk more about that next week.
Well, let me add one thing to that, which is basically is that the thing about mutual attraction is it's not easy to find necessarily, meaning that you may be attracted to somebody who's not attracted to you, as you said, or vice versa, where somebody's attracted to you and you're not attracted to them. That is the majority of people you're around. There are going to be more people attracted to you than you're attracted to. So to find that mutual attraction is definitely the goal, and something that you want to hold dear, that you don't want to just settle for less than that.
Yeah.
Because that's a baseline, at least, where you're both attracted to each other.
100%. Also, what I wanted to mention was the timing. Sometimes the timing is not right. And I wanted to use my son and his gorgeous, gorgeous girlfriend, who I adore, you can tell. And they won't mind me sharing their story. But they met on a dating app, I want to say, 7 or 8 years ago. And they went on a date, and they both mutually felt that they liked each other, but they weren't interested in dating each other for whatever reasons. But they remained friends, and they actually became really, really, really best friends. They knew everything about each other. They shared all their dating experiences, their relationships, but everything. It was long distance. She lived in Salt Lake City and he lived in California. And then about, I want to say, almost 2 years ago, she decided to come and live in California. And then they decided, as they were best friends, that maybe they should rent a house together. And anyway, so before they moved in, they both sort of tentatively declared their love for each other. And my son called me and he goes, "Mom, I don't know what to do with this. It's like, I've known her all my, for 7 years now, or 6 or 7 years. And I know everything about her, but how do I transition into," and he goes, "I love her. I've always loved her." But anyway, what I'm saying is it's a beautiful story of the timing wasn't right 6 years ago, 7 years ago. But they have an amazing relationship, and I absolutely adore her. And yes, become friends with somebody sometimes. Sometimes it's just not the right time. So don't, close the door on people that you actually really like, but there may be something at that time that's not working as far as dating. I'm not saying date them. I'm just saying if you like a lot about this person, you can keep them in your life. You can expand your social circle. It's not, I get so, especially with the law of attraction of like, you can have anything. If you can visualize it, you can have anything. And then all these women are like, well, I say women because they're friends of mine, but one friend in particular was like, I want somebody with a private jet. I want the house in Europe. I want the mansion here. And I'm thinking, what are you bringing to the table? You have a list of what this person should be.
Yes.
And I don't honestly see there's a real match there. So I'm just saying, don't lower your standards, but also don't get into this trap of being so unrealistic. All relationships are about, giving each other sort of, loving each other, accepting each other's human frailties and loving each other despite. But as I said, don't settle for abuse.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Any of those things. But so what are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, I just want to say I love your story about your son and his girlfriend. It's a beautiful story, and it's a great teaching, the fact, and I want to underscore that it is okay to make friends and not be dating. And frankly, there are women I know as dear friends of mine that if things were different, we would date.
Yeah.
But I'm grateful with the friendships, and that's okay, because the thing is that, and to be honest, in the dating apps, I haven't found that very often, that most of the people I meet in the dating apps, after we talked, there was no real connection of any sort, friendship or otherwise. So it just the way it did. But if there was one that felt like there's something more valuable, I would certainly want to continue the communication and the connection, because I enjoy the company.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is that we have got a bad habit sometimes. Maybe it's just the men who are always about, like, if this isn't the one, I don't care. You know, that sort of thing. So I really feel that it's important for both genders to create more friendships with the opposite sex, speaking heterosexually.
I was going to say, the same sex, depending where you're.
Just being clear, because being heterosexual, I speak in that language, and it's not to offend anybody. Say that's where I align with. But the thing is, by meeting somebody, women of the opposite sex, first of all, it's good to have company and get to know somebody. Plus, also, they may give you more honest feedback than a date would. The second part is, you don't know who they know, because they may discover saying, boy, I love this guy, but he's not for me. But I know my best friend will be a perfect match for him, sort of thing. So the thing is, because we have been, and again, I think maybe for men, that we tend to look through one linear track at a time. So if we're on the dating apps, we tend maybe not to look other places sometimes. I'm not sure it's true or not, but it feels like that. So the fact that be receptive to other opportunities, and definitely don't close any doors too easily, because that's what I think the part of what you said was important, because you never know what might happen. And so for those of us who are single, who are out in the great wide world, so to speak, to be connected to people of both genders, friends and connections, again, we don't know who they know. So not to say you should be asking them, who do you know? Who do you know? No, I don't mean it that way. But recognize that what we're actually in the place where we can make friendships with is that relationships often happen through connections. You know, when somebody's at a party, you meet somebody who's a friend of theirs at the party. If you hadn't stayed connected with them, you may not have met them.
Yeah. You know, I love what you just said. And I don't think there's anything wrong with saying to friends, do you know of anybody? I'm single and I would love to meet somebody. I've been doing a kettlebell workout on the beach for the last 15 years.
Wow.
And the lovely girl, she was a girl back then, that teaches the class, when I first went there, she was single. She'd had a few relationships. We were, doing our little kettlebells, and she would tell us about her dating history. And then one day she said to the group, does anybody know of a really great guy that you could introduce to? And it just so happened that one of them said, you know what, I think my nephew would be perfect for you. And she got them together, and now 15 years later, they have 3 children and they're very happily married. And again, a beautiful story, because she wasn't afraid of putting it out there. Like, I'm looking for a serious relationship, and it wasn't heavy. It wasn't pushy. It was just like, I'm tired of just casual dating and, but anyway, it worked out beautifully. So I'm saying, yes, absolutely. You can say to your friends, I'm open to a relationship. Do you know of anybody that you think would be that I could meet? Just see what happens. So.
I like that. Again, so having heard you and reconsidering what I said earlier.
I love this about it. We have different perspectives.
But also, let me qualify what I was saying, because I realize what it's saying. I totally agree with that idea about asking friends that way. But if you're the person who's always asking your friends if you know anybody, and you're being so persistent that they're getting annoyed with you, or you meet someone the first time and say, by the way, do you know anybody? I'm looking. That's not appropriate. The context you stated was that there was a familiarity and a friendship amongst the community that she was speaking to. Yeah. So she can ask them, because the other part is that they knew her, and that woman knew her enough to say, yeah, I think my nephew would be a match for you.
Yeah.
That was something part of it too. So get to know people and become friends with them, because then when you do put the request forward, they sort of know who you are and what you're looking for and what would be a match for you in the first place.
Oh, and I'm glad you clarified that, because 100%, you don't just put it out to anybody. That would be no.
That's what I want to clarify. Yes.
Yeah, she wanted to meet somebody that was all the things that she might want, and only your friends would know that. And as you say, we all knew her really well, and obviously the auntie knew her nephew. So Yeah, and you don't have to put it out more than once. You can just say, you know what, if anybody knows a really great guy, I'm available. And so that is definitely a place you can also meet people. I'm trying to think of other places. I always think art galleries are a great place, museums, art galleries, especially if that's your thing. I mean, which is my thing. It's like I used to be a painter for many years, so I love galleries, and my interest is in art. So it's just a lovely neutral place again. I mean, of course, there are bars and restaurants and things like that. Nobody's saying don't go there. But also where I used to get hit on a lot was supermarkets. It still happens.
I was going to say, that seemed like a very obvious choice because you're out there shopping, and you never know what conversation you can have.
Oh, somebody will come up to me still at the bright old age of 64. They'll say, do you know what ingredients I'd need for this recipe? Or do you know when I mean, it's so funny. I think, gosh, it's like it's another thing. But let's go back to Facebook, because I'm actually I actually don't like being approached romantically on Facebook. I just think, I actually don't accept any requests from any men anymore, because it just got to a place. But I'm not saying that, but also what I find it's doing as well is there's a lot of solicitation for work. People approach you to sell you their services, and again, I don't think that is correct. I have a lot of followers, and a lot of people are interested in the work that I do, and that's great. And if I see somebody I'm interested in their work, I will reach out and friend them. But I don't think, I don't think it's right to solicit or to pick up people, especially when I get men. This is the thing. I get the text at 3:00 in the morning. Hey, Del, how you doing? It's like, block.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, we're going to say this is the case. I would suspect, and again, I don't know, because being a guy, not being a woman, I don't know what the women are getting hit on Facebook. So clearly I'm speaking from a place of partial information. But my sense is that most of the men, and again, I don't know if the scammers are real people who are hitting on women, they don't really have any game, so to speak. So their basically approach is so blatant and so obvious, it's easy to block them. It's one of the benefits of the social media apps. You can block people pretty well. The second thing is, for social media dating etiquette, so to speak. I know Facebook did have the dating app, I don't know if it still does or not, but the dating subset within its Facebook platform. But the thing is, on Facebook, to meet somebody, I love connecting with people on Facebook because I like making friends. And I did initially when I was on Facebook way back in 2007, 2008. I was massively expanding my friendship circle because I could. It's like, well, Facebook's a place to play. Let's meet some new people.
Yeah.
But even the ones I'm attracted to, I've reached out to make friends with them, and I made friends with them for different reasons. And sometimes we have common mutual friends or whatever it is. But to ask them out, that's always a very, for me, very, very sensitive thing to do.
So they don't ask me out. They want to have a chat at 3:00 in the morning. Right. And then they want me to send pictures of myself. So it's like, I don't think so.
So by the way, for those who are watching, I'm sure you do the same thing too. You have your phone on Do Not Disturb when you sleep, so you don't get dings on your phone at 3 in the morning.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Okay, you know what, I'm looking at our time, and we are done for today. So that was a lively conversation, and so we've talked about how we meet people and initial dating. So next week we're going to talk about when the dates don't work out, and when there are breakups, and even when there's heartbreak. So I think that would be a wonderful follow-on to today. So thank you so much.
A pleasure. We'll have more fun next week, and if you got, by the way, if you got questions or comments about this show, let us know. We'd like to know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much. See you later. Bye-bye.
See you. We trust you enjoyed this episode and invite you to share this with your friends and loved ones. In fact, please subscribe to our Relationship Mastery podcast. That way you'll get each new episode fresh and shiny as soon as it is released. We'd love to hear from you as well. So go ahead and enter your questions and comments at relationshipmastery.show. Take good care. We will connect with you in our next episode of Relationship Mastery.